Hey, what's up everybody? It is Kellen here from Start Your Systems. Welcome back to MX Simulator, where today we are going to recap the 2019 Motocross of Nations that just happened over the weekend in Assen in the Netherlands. So spoiler alert in advance, if you haven't watched the race yet and you are looking to maybe wait and watch it for your own sake, or you don't want the results spoiled or whatever, we're just going to be basically recapping everything that went on this weekend right here in this video. So if you'd like to click off now, I'll give you that moment to do so. And we are going to talk about the Motocross of Nations. Gone and dusted at this point as Assen, and I'm actually playing the 2019 MXoN version of the track here in Sim, which I've had a couple people ask. The races already ran. I did not stream it, but I think someone else may have if you want to check the forums and see what went on there. But just playing the track, it's not actually close to the real track that was raced. They changed up the real track in the 2019 Nations version quite a bit, but the Sim version is based off of like the 2018 with a couple of changes, I guess, track. So yeah, we're going to play this track. We're going to talk about Motocross of Nations. Let's jump in right now. First thing I want to do before I get anywhere and kind of, I guess, to highlight where everybody finished, I'd like to kind of go back over my prediction video that I did on Thursday in MXGP 2019, where I talked about which nations I thought were going to finish where, essentially inside of the top 10, and just kind of recap that and share my thoughts about like what I was right on, what I was wrong on, and kind of how it all played out, essentially. So first up, top team, as expected, the Netherlands. They picked up the victory. I had them scoring 11 points on my sheet. They ended up scoring 18, so really not that far off. I expected Volanderen to go a couple positions higher, and I thought Hurlings wouldn't finish worse than second, but he did. He finished fourth in a moto. But we'll get to that in a second. So I was dead on the money getting Netherlands right, but I mean, that was absolutely 100% expected. In my predictions video, behind that, I had USA, Belgium, France, Italy, Great Britain, and then Switzerland was 7th, Estonia 8th, Sweden 9th, and Spain in 10th. And as it turns out, I actually got 7 of the top 10 nations, not in the right order, but in the top 10. So I was, somewhat close to that, so I was a little bit happy about that. But as it turns out, what it really was behind the Netherlands taking the victory was Belgium 2nd, Great Britain 3rd, Estonia surprisingly gets into 4th, and then you had France in 5th in a tie with the USA, who gets 6th as France gets the tiebreaker. Then 7th was kind of my shock of the nations, Germany. Latvia goes 8th, 9th was Spain, so they got one spot higher than I had listed them. And Denmark sneaks up into the top 10 with 10th. Huge thanks to MX2 class winner Thomas Kier Olsen having a terrific day. So obviously, a little bit off the mark for myself and my predictions, but a couple things kind of really swayed the event as a whole that really changed up, especially the top 6 order, which I thought was pretty sturdy in that. I guess I got Italy pretty off the mark because they didn't even finish inside of the top 10. Lupino had a terrible day by what I would consider his regular standards, even though he's been hurt. I thought he'd be a little bit better. Monticelli rode great. Ferrato was pretty good as well, but Lupino really dragged them down, so that was unfortunate for Italy, the Italians. But what really kind of shifted up the top 5-6 positions, I think the most, was the kind of collapse of the USA a little bit. I don't want to say it was a collapse because what ended up happening was like an accident, and you can't blame anybody. It's a racing thing. It happens, and it's unfortunate that it had to happen the way it did. But if you weren't watching, if you haven't seen it, or if you did see it, what ended up happening was off the start, first moto, which is MX2 and MXGP class, they put Justin Cooper down the inside, which would have been gate selection number 3. Anderson down the outside, which was gate selection number 23. They ended up coming out fairly even. Cooper got out jumped by some of the 450s on the inside and swallowed up a bit. So him and Anderson were right near each other. They were, I think at the time somewhere in around the 8, 9, 10 positions. They're right alongside Gautier Paulin, and first couple corners were right, long right into a left-right little kink, and then finish line jump, or not the finish line jump, I should say, like the first little tabletop that was right there. Excuse me. And then the U-turn coming back up the pit lane, there was rollers alongside kind of the pit lane, and Justin Cooper was, like I said, right alongside Paulin, just got a weird little kick, just didn't look like much, but it just caused him to kind of dig the front end and slosh to the left side of the track, and he almost came to a dead stop before Anderson, who was chugging along down the left side of the track, abruptly greeted him on the side, and they collided and went down. Cooper went down very hard, and Anderson kind of tumbled over and was fortunate not to get very hurt, but he just kind of rolled over the side of the track. And wouldn't you just believe it, the freaking United States team colliding with each other 3 corners into the Motocross of Nations. I mean, like, that's bad luck if I've ever heard it. I mean, you make your own luck, I get it, but I felt like that was kind of like, wow, that sucks, because honestly, if Saturday was any indication, they definitely looked like ready to play a little bit. Maybe they weren't going to beat the Netherlands, especially when the rain started coming on Sunday, but I at least thought, okay, now it's for sure they're podium contenders. Before you were a little bit like, was the training they did beforehand, was it going to work? Were they actually going to be kind of semi on par with the GP guys? And honestly, I thought they were. Anderson and Osborne just rode to, semi-solid rides in the qualifying races. Osborne looked a little bit off kind of all weekend, but Justin Cooper won his qualifying race, so that was a big talking point. And then, of course, it's pretty much all out the door as soon as they hit each other right off the start, because Cooper ended up getting his clutch lever broken off, and it looked like he hurt his hand pretty bad, so when he was getting up, he was holding his hand. He actually stood there for a while before deciding to get back on the bike because he thought he may have, I guess, broken his hand. Haven't heard officially whether or not he did break his hand or not. Just saw an Instagram post that he made where his hand was pretty bloody on the top side of it, just a lot of big scrapes where Anderson kind of collided with him. And Anderson got up and put on quite a good charge, actually, because they were both, like 36th, 37th probably when they both got going again. And Anderson in that first moto actually got all the way to 12th before crashing on the last lap and dropping to 17th. So, at 12th, you could throw away Cooper's 25 that he got in the first moto if Anderson got a 12th, and you're still like, you know what, like, look, they're in a good spot. But Anderson crashing back to 17th, and you're like, ooh, now you got to carry a pretty high, semi-high at least, double-digit score with you. And then Cooper went out in the second moto, clearly was laboring his hand a little bit, just couldn't get the ball rolling, didn't get a good start, which didn't help, and struggled his way to 29th, crashed a couple times, it looks like. And that, I think, was in a nutshell what cost Team USA. Overall, I think Osborne was not the Osborne we know. I think Anderson probably rode about on par with where I would say he should go in that class. I think that, he could expect to be 5th, 6th best MXGP class rider there, and that's pretty much where he was all weekend long. So I think Anderson did his job. I think Cooper just terrible luck, and kudos to him for gritting it out and going back out there with his hand hurting as bad as it probably did. And then just, Osborne, I don't know if it was pressure of the team or he just didn't get the setup right or what, but it just was not good. He got lapped in the second moto, straight up, never crashed. So, not a good look, but, just like I said last year with Team USA and Redbud, and it didn't work out then, we didn't expect them to win this year, but hey, like, I would just want to give a huge round of applause to Jason Anderson, Cooper Webb, and Zach Osborne for going and actually representing the USA, which is lost on some current riders in this generation. It's very sad. But, they didn't just go and, show up and ride. They went to Europe for almost a whole month in Anderson and Osborne's case, over 2 weeks for Cooper's case. They tested, they trained. If you watched any of the Team Fried vlogs, it seems like they had a pretty good time. So, anybody that says that, it's all just a bag of crap going to Europe and testing and training constantly, it looks like they had a pretty good time doing it all. So I don't think it's as bad as some people build it out to be. for having to go out and basically train for another race that they aren't always slated to do. But we got to give these guys credit. It's astonishing that we won 22 out of the 73 Motocross of Nations as a country, but I feel like fans got a little too complacent in thinking that that was just the norm, because for a long time there was only 1 or 2 GP riders that were on the pace of the US riders, but we're in a time right now where there's 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 or more GP riders that you could say on any given day could take it to a lot of the top American guys. And, they were missing a lot of the top GP guys there, too. There was no Cairoli, obviously no Tom Vial was there. Max Anstey out. Just a lot of kind of bigger, heavy hitters weren't even there. And it still seemed like the U.S. riders were struggling to keep pace with the MXGP class regulars, which I'll get into a discussion about, something that came up right after the race in regards to that in a moment, but I want to continue through these nations. So shout out Team USA. Thank you for representing, and I really, really hope that we continue to send such good teams like that, where they are going to send their best effort every time and not just look at it as a sideshow race, which it is not. So yeah, thanks to them. Really, really happy that got to experience them going to this Motocross of Nations. Let's talk about Belgium and Great Britain, who ended up on the podium instead of the USA, as I had listed. Belgium, I had initially listed as third, but I, kind of actually said to some people through tweets and some comments on the video that I really felt Belgium actually would be second. But I was being a little bit kind of harsher on Kevin Strybos because he was, really not that good this year. And I know he didn't really super gel with the JWR team, and they just let him go before this Nations, and he was kind of almost on a factory bike for the Nations this year. But I still felt like, man, it just hasn't been his year. He is going to need to pull kind of a rabbit out of his butt here and ride like the old Strybos, and he honestly kind of did that. It didn't help that he crashed a lot more in the motos, but on Saturday he was almost about to win the MXGP class qualifying race. Something that Glenn Coldenhoff, everybody thought would win easily. Ended up going to Paul's Jonas, and Kevin Strybos was on Jonas's tail the whole time, and they absolutely dropped Coldenhoff in that moto. So I was like, man, the Strybos that we need to see here came to play, and it just didn't really translate on Sunday, and it wasn't helped by the fact that I thought, Jago Geerts would be the MX2 class winner, and he was the best rider in the second moto for sure, but the bike let go in the first moto, so that had to be their drop score, when I honestly thought Geerts would get the second best overall scores for the team behind the Jerryman Van Horbeek. So Geerts DNF didn't help. Strybos's crashes didn't help. Otherwise, Belgium, I think, was pretty clearly the second best nation. They just kind of had a whole package working. Even when Strybos crashed, he was able to charge through the field pretty well. Geerts looked fantastic. Van Horbeek's starts were on point and ran up front and even led a little bit of a moto. So, Belgian riders have always come to play at the Nations, and clearly they did not disappoint this year. So kudos to them for what has been an up and down year for really all those riders. Geerts has been kind of the most steady Eddie of that group, with Van Horbeek having to deal with kind of going through almost semi-retirement at the beginning of the year, and then basically being on a private invested team that was almost privateer for the beginning of the season because there wasn't a whole lot of support. And then Strybos's up and down year. For them to get second, I think, was actually a pretty huge deal for all of them. So congrats to them. And then Great Britain, honestly, kind of the feel-good story of the Nations, I would say, because Simpson has never been able to be on the British team that stood on the box. They've been third in the last 3 years now, but Simpson was not on any of those teams. And before that, they hadn't been on the podium since '94. So it was Simpson, who's longtime British rider and has been for over 10 years at this point, finally gets to stand on a podium as a British rider, and it clearly looked like it was not lost on him how big of a moment that was. So that was really cool to see. I thought Watson rode fabulous for a guy that only 2 weeks ago found out he was on the team, and only a week ago started putting 30-minute motos together. His fitness is always going to be there because he's a World Enduro Super Sport rider, whatever that thing is called. But I just thought his actual skills for a 30-minute moto were I mean, right on point. You could easily make a case for him being a contender for a GP spot next year because of the rides that he was having, I think, because he just looked fantastic. And I know it's sand and he's really good in the sand, but still, I just thought, man, for being away for the GPs for a while and racing these enduro things, he looked really, really good. So that was awesome to see. And then Sterry, I think, just kind of did his job. He had a bad first moto, or was it the second moto? He had a bad moto in general, but one of the motos, he just basically put a tow hitch out and grabbed onto all the MX2 guys that were all together. Olsen, Geertz, Valandrin, and Sterry. They were just like in a group, just kind of hanging out for a lot of, I think it was the second moto that they're all together. And that's exactly what I think Sterry needed to do. I don't think he needed to be the hero of the nation. I think he just needed to stay with the MX2 guys and give his counterparts a chance to put solid motos together. And, you know, other than the bad moto that he had, I think the good moto that he did have really helped that team get onto the box because he rode just as he should. So shout out to the British. You know, I had listed them 6th, and I had even said in the video I could make a case for them going as high as 3rd and a case for them going as low as like 10th. And look at that, they went as high as 3rd. But I will say that, you know, they probably should have gotten 5th, definitely should have gotten 4th, but the luck of the draw, you know, finally fell the anvil, if you will, on top of France, because Gauthier Paulin was once again willing the French team into a great spot. Podium contention all day long, was in a podium position with an outside shot at going as high as 2nd. Late in that 3rd moto, the 2nd moto Paulin ran, and then the bike lets go, which a lot of bikes were going, so it's not unusual, but that one had to hurt for Paulin because he definitely was the guy that was, you know, doing the work for that nation. You know, Renault had a couple up and down motos, a lot of crashes, and Tixier rode honestly quite impressively well, but Paulin was still the guy that they were leaning on to get those low scores, and he was doing the job, and it just didn't work out. But France probably should have been 3rd, and that would have moved Great Britain back to 4th. So, you know, I had them 6th, they probably would have went 4th. I had France 4th, they probably should have went 3rd, ended up going 5th. And then how about freaking Estonia, P4? That is, man, I love that. The 19th consecutive year in a row that Tanel Leok is on the Estonian MX of Nations team. He freaking first race he ever did for the Estonian team was back in 2001. I mean, he has been an absolute workhorse for that team, and to finally have it kind of pay off in that level, I mean, 4th is really cool. I thought Harry Kulas was incredible, rode so damn well. Whole shot of moto, ran up inside of the top 5 the entirety of it basically, and Leok, as solid as he is, really just put in a couple good rides, and then they just needed one good ride out of Ratsep, and I think he finished 18th in a moto or something like that. And there you go, Estonia 4th. That's like, again, kind of like the British team, like a good little feel-good story for, you know, that kind of small of a nation. You don't always, you know, think of Estonia as like a motocross superpower. But yeah, there they are, right there in 4th with some of the best motocross nations in the world. That's awesome, you know. They rode great. They definitely deserve it. And kudos to them. Hats off to Ratsep, Leok, and Kulas for really just putting everything together at the right time and riding fabulously. As I mentioned, though, France, up and down day, gets 5th, leaning on Paulin a lot. I mean, again, kind of what could have been if you had Vial instead of Renault. They definitely would have been on the podium, I think, probably 2nd. Don't think they would have challenged the Netherlands, but Vial definitely would have got better starts than Renault did. So that would have been, you know, a huge positive thing. And then, you know, I saw Villeman tweeting a couple times that Gauthier Paulin was just wearing his Monster Energy hat. He had no FFM logos on his hat, which is why Vial was left off the team in the first place, because there's a dispute about the FFM logo needing to be bigger than the Red Bull logo that was going to be on Vial's team hat. And all the while, Paulin just never even runs the FFM hat all along. I don't know if that was just to spite them and say, like, you guys are stupid for leaving this guy off our team. But either way, the FFM is absolutely the dumbest people to run a motorcycle organization. Just barely dumber than the AMA. The AMA is pretty dumb, but you know, the FFM is by far the dumbest. So what are you gonna do? They ended up 5th. The 5-peat was trying to be a 6-peat. It is now a back to square 1-peat. They are not champions of the world anymore, like they have been since 2014. Yeah, guess we'll just hope for next year that riders that will actually do the job are willing to ride for their team, and the FFM actually lets them ride for the team. But I don't know. I don't think anything's going to change until you get rid of Jacques Ballet. Anyway, USA 6th, as mentioned. Talked about them a little bit. Moving on to 7th, though, Germany. Didn't see this one coming. You have no Nagel. You have no Roxen. I don't feel like you have any realistic big shot. Germany is a little weak on the depth, and you know, Marcus Schiffer, who was on the winning team in 2012, doesn't really race anymore, so you don't even have Schiffer to kind of help out with the veteran experience, but he was definitely the weak link back in 12 when they won, so I don't know if you even want him. But Dennis Ulrich rode fabulous, got a 9th in a moto, and then you had Tom Koch, who's going to be kind of the next, probably the next big thing Germany is going to bank a lot of their hopes on. I think in the future you'll probably see a team of Nagel, Roxen, and Tom Koch be a pretty solid German team going to the line for the nations. And you know, Koch was a great rider, just put a lot of stuff together that worked out, and I think he ended up going somewhere in the range of like 13, 15 or so. Just solid scores. Ends him up 7th. Again, I had Germany because, you know, Koch and Lagerfeld and Ulrich kind of all fairly unproven at the highest level. Ulrich is the guy with the most experience, but he has never been like, wow, look at Dennis Ulrich just setting the world ablaze, you know? So they definitely surprised me. They moved up 10 spots in my freaking rankings that I had them in, so that was the biggest shock, in my opinion, in terms of a team that jumped well above where I had them initially punching at. So good for them. They rode great. What can I say? Then Latvia, carried heavily again by Pauls Jonas, who had a great ride in both of his motos. You know, I think without Jonas, Latvia maybe even has a bit of a struggle to qualify like they did last year. But with Jonas, they suddenly clearly become a contender inside of the top 10 because he did a lot of the bulk work and got them there. But obviously the supporting roles were needed, and they stepped up as well. So 8th for Latvia, I think that's pretty good. Spain went one higher than I had predicted. Prado doing most of the workload. Larrañaga had a bit of an off day, I think, for his standards, and Campano had a better day than I had expected him to. So they really ended up pretty much exactly where I thought. You know, I think they definitely would have been 10th if the Australians didn't have the worst luck at the nations, I think. USA was pretty bad, but Australia was almost worse. And then rounding it out was Denmark, which again, like I said, carried by Thomas Kjær Olsen, you know, to will them up into the top 10. Those MX2 wins help out a ton. You have an MX2 rider that can win the class, and your nation is suddenly in a really, really good position to do some damage through the field. So Olsen picking up the MX2 victory, and then I think it was Geyser, right, that picked up the MXGP class victory because he went 1-2. Yeah, 1-2, I believe. And Koldenhoff went 1-1 in Open to get the victory there. So those were your champions of the nations. Individual classes, Nations Cup went to the Netherlands for the first time with the King of the Netherlands there. Really cool to see him celebrating with the team, sitting on factory bikes. Like, can you just imagine the President of the United States? Like, I'm not trying to get political, but it just could imagine if the President of the United States had been at Redbud last year. That would have been a media spectacle for one, but that would just be kind of like cool to see, you know, the leader of a nation get that deep in behind an event that's going on that, you know, is pretty big for a certain niche sport in your kind of global spectrum. So I thought that was really cool that the King of the freaking Netherlands was at this race, hanging out, celebrating, and the Dutchies brought it home. So a couple things I want to hit on before I wrap up this video. First of all, like I said, Australia had the worst luck of the nations. I was dead wrong, and I will eat crow here because I didn't have Australia in my top 10. I had them 11th, and I think that realistically speaking, they did ride better than most everybody thought, except for Australians. Australians clearly thought the world of their team. I really didn't think that they would go better than 8th, 7th at the best, but they were in a position probably to get 5th for a long time. Then Regan Duffy's bike blows up. Dean Ferris has a god-awful end to his motos, and they go from right inside of the top 5 in terms of nations classifications to having 2 bad races right at the end and dropping all the way back to 15th. Like that's just bad luck there. I think that Australia was a much better nation overall on the weekend than the 15th is going to show on paper. And like I said, I'll eat crow because I didn't think Duffy and Webster, who had never raced on this world stage before, would ride as good as they did. And freaking Webster probably impressed me the most. Duffy was great, but Webster was consistently just like, hey, all these regular MX2 guys, let me go ahead and just get in here, start banging bars with you like I've been here the entire time. Like, a little bit similar to the Mitch Evans thing last year, where it's like, wow, Mitch Evans, you haven't heard much about him. And it's not like we as Americans, or particularly me, are like completely stupid to what's going on in Australia. Like, I keep up with the races, I watch all the updates, I try to follow it as best as I can. We pretty much only have like motoonline.au as a really good source for all that stuff over here, but to the best of my abilities, I try to follow that, so I felt like I was at least in a reasonable position to understand where those guys would be coming in, and I had them 11th. They probably should have finished 5th. Again, like I said, I'll eat crow on that. Australians definitely should have been higher up, and I'm excited to see how that nation does once you have Hunter and Jet Lawrence both on that team, and find whoever else you want. But those guys are gonna. Australia is coming back around to a situation, I think, in my personal opinion, where we were looking at when it used to be, Reed, Meddy, McFarlane, all these other guys, that they had like almost a legit shot at winning with how much talent they had stacked up. I think Australia is well on their way to having that again, because there's a lot of good Aussies coming through right now. And I think that's really awesome to see, because it almost felt like once Reed stopped being the elite guy that he was, that we were in a bit of a lull with fast Aussies. Like Dean Ferris and Todd Waters were like the 2 guys that everybody was leaning on for high-level Australian riders, but then there wasn't a big depth going on behind them. Now it's growing back up to a good level, so that's cool to see for you Aussie fans. And like I said, I apologize for not including them higher up on my list before, but that's just how I had figured it out before, and I was wrong. Last thing I want to touch on here, because it just kind of, 2 last things that I want to touch on before I leave, because they both kind of irked me over the weekend, and I was kind of like, that's really dumb. First of all, the 5 minutes, I would say, after the last race ended, Ricky Carmichael, bam, tweets, well, time to host a Supercross of Nations now. Or, he didn't say that, but him saying, like, what do you guys think? Should we host a Supercross of Nations? Is almost his way of saying, I think we should host a Supercross of Nations. And I tweeted, not like in response to him, but I saw a couple other people like responding to him and saying like, yeah, let's get America back on top and da-da-da-da-da. And I tweeted in response to those people like, this is how USA fans react. Suddenly we're not the winningest nation in the world or whatever, and we got to find a way to make our riders look good and, pick on something that's going to make them win. And it just pissed me off. It's like, guys, the Motocross of Nations have been around for 73 years. The USA had no problem when Supercross was still in its height and glory days 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, going out there, winning the Motocross of Nations, no freaking problemo. It was like a joy every year. People always loved going because it was like a guaranteed US victory. Now suddenly, because they can't win, everyone's like, Motocross of Nations? Schmotocross of Schmations. Let's do something different. No, like this is the elite. You have to win this to be considered one of the best motocross riders in the world, in my opinion. This is putting everybody on the track at the same time that are some of the best riders in the world and saying who's going to come out on top. As a nation, USA has done it a lot, but as individual riders, it hasn't always been that way either, and now it's going against them as a nation as well, and suddenly we got to find some way to get them back on top. No. You know, in a sport where the American riders already complain about there being too many races, you're going to add another race in which a lot of them will probably be forced to go to because it's Supercross, and oh my God, we gotta love Supercross. And no, we don't need more races. Like, we need to encourage the U.S. riders that enjoy going, that as fans we're 100% behind them, and we hope them the best, and we're so proud of them to go out there and race for the United States and try to represent us. But we don't need the Supercross of Nations because it's going to be 8 nations showing up, and nations 7, 8, 9, or 6, 7, 8, I should say, are going to be guys that are rolling a lot of the jumps because they don't do Supercross. Like, it's just dumb. Supercross is slowly becoming something I don't love that much. You know, it's not the foundation of the sport. You and I, as consumers of dirt bikes, can go out and ride a motocross track tomorrow if you want. You're more likely to get in a car accident tomorrow than you are to ever step on a professional Supercross track in your lifetime, let alone ride one in your lifetime. And I know that Supercross Futures has kind of helped that, but it's still not really Supercross. You know, it's not the same level that those guys are racing. It's such a niche little thing, and it's sometimes just so annoying that people hang everything on it as like, well, if they're not good at Supercross, then they're clearly not just the best riders ever. Like, that's such a dumb theory in my opinion, and doesn't hold water in my opinion, but whatever. I guess some people will stand for that, and I think it's dumb that we need to find another way for the USA to win when all along they were winning easily, and now they just are not because of bad luck or weird things or other things like that, and they are unwilling to figure it out. They're more willing to find something different that can make us win and make us look gorgeous and beautiful and the best nation on earth. Like, it's so stupid. I hate that there's always an excuse every year that when the Americans go and lose at the Motocross of Nations, there's an excuse. Whatever it is. Too much Supercross. Too late in the year. They're not accustomed to GP tracks. Where in the hell were all these excuses 15 years ago? I just want to know. Can someone find me a clip of James Stewart just ragging repeatedly on the Motocross of Nations? No, probably not, because he went out there and won the freaking Motocross of Nations. Because he was willing to do it. He's willing to go further, willing to go that extra mile, go out there and race for his country, even after a long season of riding and racing. Apparently that's lost on all these current guys. I don't get it, but whatever. And then the last thing I want to talk about is in regards to the track at Assen, which, look, as a fan of the sport, I don't particularly love this new age generation of building flat tracks with jumps everywhere. It's kind of like super motocross to me. You're basically just making like a hybrid racetrack. But in terms of the actual surface at Assen, I mean, honestly, I don't get like what is such a huge hate for it, because it's Lommel. You know, it's not as deep necessarily, but it's still just sandy, flat, couple tabletops, rollers, singles, off cambers. It's Lommel. It just happens to have a huge grandstand around it, which should make it better, but apparently it makes it worse because it's a man-made track. Meanwhile, all these tracks in the USA are starting to become these dumb, flat, man-made tracks. Jump, jump, turn, jump, jump, turn, jump, jump, turn. Long is lost the art of off-camber corners and ski jumps and large, steep downhills and drop-offs and step-downs and all these other things like that. It's, no, we got to make these gorgeous, pristine tables so everybody can get their Insta-bangers. It's like, I don't like that crap. I don't really love that they had to go to Assen for the Nations either, but I'm not going to go on board with people saying that this is by far the dumbest thing ever, because the same people that I've seen saying that are like, but Lommel is glorious. It's motocross history. It's the same freaking track. It's the same jumps. It's the same turns. It's almost the same soil. The only difference is it's actually in the countryside and not built in to this, you know, pristine motorsports facility that also runs MotoGP. I couldn't understand how many people were complaining about the track all weekend long, and then would say that Lommel is amazing. It's the same thing. So anyway, a couple rants at the end of the video because everybody always loves when I rant and then they come into the comment section and rant back at me, but I appreciate that because I love when people actually come in and comment and try to explain the reasoning why instead of just saying I'm garbage. I always like actual discussions going on. So hopefully you guys actually enjoyed my discussions. Whether or not you agree with me or not, I'm always fine with your opinion either way, but I just like stating my opinion so maybe people will kind of understand more where I'm coming from, I guess, but I'm sure you guys are always going to be a little bit more differently in the opinion department than I am, and I understand that. So hopefully we can hit the comment section and bench race a little bit more, but that has been my take on the 2019 Motocross of Nations at Assen in the Netherlands, won by the Netherlands this year for the first time in the 73rd running of the event. The Netherlands are at the top step of the podium, so big congrats to them. Big congrats to everybody that raced and made this event so awesome this weekend. Love this event every year. Can't wait for next year. Erne, gonna be there, I hope. And hope to see you guys all then as well. Thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.